everyone, I'm Danny Bedrosian. In this episode, we're going to talk about video game music and how indie composers go about designing and producing interactive music for games. It is similar in a lot of ways to film and television music, but what makes it different and also really interesting as an art form is that interactive music is never exactly the same every time you experience it. Most music that we are used to listening to has the same beginning, then middle, then end every time you hear it. But game music works more like a web. It's essentially this giant network of if-then conditions that's determined each time you play the game. So this makes game music really fun to design and write, but it also takes a very different way of thinking about music altogether. Also, after the music is designed and composed, there is an added step of actually coding the music into the game so that it follows all the conditions that you set for the music. So we're going to take a look at a demo web game that I scored called Nightmares. But before we get into the more complex games, let's take a look at a simple example. In this example, our brave hero is trying to escape without getting hit by several obstacles. We could start by scoring this level like a casual or arcade-style game like Mario Kart or Candy Crush. These games, for the most part, have a single track that loops repeatedly until the timer runs out. But in more complex games, we might want to make the music a little more complex as well, in a way that heightens the drama and responds to the events in the gameplay. So how can we do this? We could start by splitting the track into two parts, the first loop at the start of the level, which would be lower in energy, and a second loop at the end of the level, which would be higher in energy. The music would then follow the condition that if the player triggers the doorway, then the music will progress to loop 2. However, if we stuck with this structure as it is, we're still pretty limited. For example, we might want to quickly intensify or subdue the music according to specific conditions within the game, like running out of time or decreasing life. So there are a few techniques we could use here, but the method I'll show is called layering, and that involves pulling apart the music into several stacked tracks. One low energy, one medium energy, and one high energy. That way, we can program these to fade in and out based on whatever condition we'd like. In this case, we can set layer 2 to fade in as time runs out and layer 3 to fade in as health bar decreases. Additionally, I'll design each of these tracks so that not only can they play all stacked together, but also so that each one of them can stand entirely on their own. This will allow for so much more flexibility and customization. So altogether, in this example, that makes 6 snippets of music to write for this scenario level. It starts to get even more complicated as more levels and worlds become available. In this case, we'd need to write additional loop segments for each of these new possible game paths, and each with their own set of intensity layers and so on. Okay, so let's take a look at the game that I scored, Nightmares. Our main character is a boy who's trying to escape from these nightmarish toys that are trying to kill him. The first step, as with scoring a film scene, is talking to, in this case, the game developers, to make sure that I'm writing exactly the kind of music that they want for the game. Often, we won't even get to see the final version of the game when we start writing. Instead, we might get some artboards or basic design, so it's really, really important to have good communication with the team throughout the entire production process so that there aren't any major problems down the line. After talking about a ton of different aspects of the game, we'll end up drafting a document outlining all of the music cues that we need. And this is a very loose document because music will be added and subtracted and reworked as the game comes together. So flexibility is a really important part of the process. But for this game, here is the music structure that I decided on. For the first minute, a piece of music will loop repeatedly, but because that would get boring very fast, what I'm going to do here is actually write 3 different loop segments, and they're going to shuffle at random during the first minute. I'm also going to write each of these loops to be different lengths, and that will help keep things interesting. Then, triggered by minute 2, a new loop sequence will replace the first set. In addition, for all the loop pieces, there will be 3 layers that will fade in and out according to the player's health and number of monsters nearby. Finally, I'll write music for winning, music for losing, music for the menu screen, and music for the transition from the menu screen to the actual gameplay. Even though this is a very different process from scoring a TV scene, all of the creative principles of writing good music still apply. I still want to write interesting melodies and good themes that develop over the course of the entire story. What we're looking for is the emotional arc of the scene, or in this case, the level, and writing good music to support that. But skipping ahead, I've already written and programmed all of these elements into Logic. I've organized them into layers so that when I export them, I can isolate a single layer. And as you can imagine here, organizing these is incredibly important. Before moving on to the next step, I want to point out an interesting detail that I have to pay attention to in game music that I don't have to do with regular scoring. And because game scoring requires a lot of looping, I have to treat reverb differently. For a loop to work, you have to restart the track on the very next downbeat, or you'll have silence until the reverb dies out. But if the music were to loop just like this, it would sound like a glitch, because the reverb tail at the end is getting cut off. To adjust for this, I'll have to take the reverb produced from the end of the loop and layer it onto the start of the track. Now when it loops, it'll be a seamless transition. Finally, we've reached the last step of actually implementing the music we wrote into the game. And in big budget games, there's probably somebody already assigned to deal with this and do this for you. But as an indie composer, you have to have a basic knowledge of how the game technology and software work. And this game is using Unity, which is a very common game development software. And it actually does already have the ability to drop in basic music and give it basic commands. But I'm actually going to use an additional program outside of Unity called Wwise. And Wwise will give me a lot more flexibility and customization for the music, and give us a lot more controls over when the music plays and how it functions within the game. So here's how it works. Essentially, it's organized into a hierarchy of folders, tracks, within segments, within playlists. I'll have one for various states of the game, like one for gameplay, one for menu screen, one for win and lose, etc. Then my priority now is to program the music to change according to the possible events that might occur in the game. These specific events or conditions in the game design are called real-time control parameters, or RTCP for short. For this game, I wanted my layer 2 tracks to fade in with decreasing health, and my layer 3 tracks to fade in with increasing number of enemies on screen. Therefore, I'm going to program my RTCPs to be player health and enemies in range. Then, I'll go into the tracks and I'll put in the instruction to increase the volume of layer 2 as the player health decreases. Then I'll do the same for layer 3, but with the enemies in range RTCP. I'll also set my first layer to decrease in volume so that you don't blow out your speakers as the other 2 layers increase. I'll then need to program each of these segments to shuffle. Last, I'll have to design the music to break out of this cycle, in case the player wins or loses or even starts the game again. So I've added the 4 different game states that I want. I'll generate a sound bank, select the platforms that the game is designed for, and send it off to Unity. There's one last thing I'll have to do back in Unity so that Unity knows what I'm using for my real-time controls. So under Player, I'll add a new script, call it Player Health. I won't go into the details of coding, but I'll have to add in this piece of script, and as you can see, this coordinates identically with how I named it back in Wwise. I've also done the same for the enemies in range parameter. I've sped over a lot, but realistically speaking, this entire process takes a lot of trial and error and troubleshooting and time to get it just right. But I hope this gave you a good behind-the-scenes look at how the music for your games come to life. And if you want to try out a level of this demo game, I'll post a link in the caption. Also, check out my website, dannybedrosian.com, and let me know if you have any questions. Thanks for watching, and happy gaming!